Hi, Huang. Would you like me to start?
Yes, please. Hi, everyone.
Welcome,
See you.
everybody. It's so good to see you and see your names written up. It's really good that you could join us. So this is our regular update on UQ's academic integrity work. And this time it's a little bit special because not only do we have existing and new academic integrity officers from the school and faculty, so welcome to you, but we also have people from the Integrity Week program that's run this year as part of a broader integrity program. So welcome to everyone. We run this session at the beginning of each semester for those who are interested in this work. It's a fairly fast-moving space, especially for now, with things like generative AI, etc. So we like to keep everyone in the community updated, and we also would very much value your feedback. So any questions that you would have during the different sessions that we go through, please put them in the chat, and Huang, who's coordinating, will put them onto a Padlet. So if you could go to the next slide, Huang, I'll just explain a bit further. So we have a number. Oh, firstly, I would just like to acknowledge country, and pay respects to the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we're all meeting today, and particularly pay our respects to their ancestors and descendants who have valuable cultural and spiritual connections to country and offer those contributions to us in Australia and globally. So thank you. So this is a very brief rundown. It's quite a packed session, but you can see there we are trying to inform. I'll talk a little bit about the wider sector things that are happening, and then Peter will talk about resources that we have for you to use. We also have things from Huang and Ruth about the similarity report. So there's a new version of that. Rod will talk to us briefly around the Student Complaints and Grievance Revolution sort of update. And we're very lucky too to have two guest presenters, James and Glenys. So they will talk about two topics. One is a project run in the library for copyright, so leveraging copyright to remove some of the UQ branded materials from file sharing sites like StuDoc2 and Course Hero, but he'll talk more about that. And Glenys will talk to us about Bing Chat, so you might have seen that already. And then most importantly, then after that is that question and answer time where we'd love to be able to discuss with you things that help you in your practice. Thank you. So you may have seen this slide. I tend to use it quite regularly, but I just wanted to share it in case you're new to this area. So it can be a bit daunting, but some of the integrity issues we've had in learning and teaching have been around, of course, for a long, long time. Students make mistakes. They plagiarize because they're not sure what to do. Sometimes they choose to do that. Collusion's been around. It's a perennial problem. And I suppose to a lesser degree, but seriously, data fabrication is also there. But probably three of those on the bottom line. Contract cheating's been around now probably for 10 years in the sense of the commercial contract cheating, although we've had family members and other people do assignments for students for a long time. The two, I guess, in orange there are a little bit different. So if you're not familiar with file sharing, I'm sure James will tell you a bit more later, but it's basically where students go to study sites. For STEM, that's most familiar one is Chegg, but there's also Course Hero, StuDoc2, ThinkSwap, a whole lot of different ones, and they get legitimate help, but they can also fall into misconduct because they can upload material that's not their own and download and submit parts of answers from somebody for an assessment task. So there's a bit of a blurred space. But then also with generative AI, because we're looking at integrity problems there, but we also want to encourage students to use it. So again, not everything about using Gen falls into this challenge side. There's actually positive. So that again makes it a little bit more complicated for us all. And I just put at the bottom there, medical certificate falsification. We've had several rounds of this over the last, well, I've been here 8 years, where some students get into significant difficulty because they're actually frauding or falsifying these certificates. So just need to be mindful of that. It can be academic misconduct as well as misconduct because they're actually getting an advantage. So that one pops up. regularly, I guess. And so if you're an integrity officer, that's something else that you may have to deal with. Thank you. Just in the wider context, of course, TEX has been doing work in the context of artificial intelligence, and they ran a big forum and actually published this document called Assessment Reform in the Age of Artificial Intelligence. And it's not like the school, if you're familiar with the schools framework, they've got quite a rigorous set of principles to follow. This is more a compass document, a guiding document, and in it, if you want to go to the next slide, Wong, you'll see that there's two key principles, and they're not really new to us all. But if we think of them in the importance of artificial intelligence use, these are the types of things that we want to keep in mind. And so obviously, the first one there is assessment and learning experiences equip students to participate. So ethics becomes a big thing. Active participation becomes another. And the society, of course, is ubiquitous use of AI is going to be there. So how do we help the students to ethically and actively use these tools? And then, of course, it falls to us as well to form trustworthy judgments about the learning of the student in these times. So and there's been a lot of work and thinking around this in 2023, and it's ongoing. But at the moment, it sits at multiple, inclusive and contextualized, so authentic type of approaches to assessment seem to be the ones in which, one, students can use AI more legitimately, but it also actually makes the assignments a little bit more difficult for them to cheat if we're looking from that perspective. And then inside that document on the next slide is just a list of, I guess, propositions. So authentic engagement, these are the things we're going to be thinking about when we're designing assessment or when we're looking at some sort of evaluation, just generally of our own assessment, whatever. We're looking, as a sector at a systematic approach to program assessment, or if you're in another institution course, the bigger picture where this is aligned often through accreditations, but not everyone has that. So would it help us if we actually had a more programmatic approach for every program to be able to plot where to use AI and where at UQ, for example, could we have security around those assessments that are very important to our disciplines and qualifications for the students, so we know that the students have actually authored for themselves. So we are doing work in that space. Obviously, we want our students to learn. And I guess that's one of the biggest problems as an educator can be quite disappointing if the students cheat, because we know that they're actually not learning. And so if they're running off and using ChatGPT to write everything, which, perhaps was one of our fears last year, I'm not so sure now, they may not be learning because that's not, they've just sort of done the quick method. We do want students to use AI, and we want them to use it with each other. So that collaborative kind of learning, and of course, security at meaningful points, which I've already mentioned. Thanks, Wong. This is the second thing. So if you want more information about that, please go to the TEXA website. There is more information there, but I wanted to just share with you another initiative. So the idea of a student academic honor code has not been a new thing at UQ, because it was actually a recommendation of the Academic Integrity Action Plan back in 2021. And it's one of the last ones that's actually been enacted out of that plan. And it will be coming into effect at the end of this semester or early next semester. So we're in the process now of the students, we partner with students, have written the actual code, which you can see there, the points, basically an aspirational statement around that they're part of this community of integrity and the graduate attributes that we have, that, it'll be their work. I'm trustworthy to do my work and I uphold the values of this institution. And there's a bit more information there in Integrity Week, because this is actually running at the same time as this session for Ready to Teach Week. The idea of this is aspirational in the sense that it's setting the tone for students as being part of UQ. And after it was written in collaboration with student leaders, there was a survey put out to students, and then on that website, you'll see a bit more information about those results. But the overwhelming response was support for this to actually come into being. So that's why it's now actually sort of in process. So you may hear more about how that's actually going to be communicated through with the student leaders, etc. Thanks, Wong. And now I'll hand over to Peter, who's a brilliant learning designer who develops all these resources to help you with your teaching practice. Don't forget, if you have a question, please put it into the chat so we can bring it up in the Q&A later. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine, and hello, everybody. What I'd like to do now is just run you through some of the resources that we have around academic integrity. These are resources that we've got available both for integrity officers to help you in your role and for course coordinators working with their students. The academic integrity pages on ELI's site have got a range of information about UQ's priorities, and there's a resources link that goes off there. And a lot of those resources are suitable for lecturers to use in class. There's resources such as identifying contract cheating, guidelines for markers looking for contract cheating, the academic integrity pledge for students, and their academic integrity slides for use in the classroom with discussion, for a discussion with students. Now, if you head over to the Blackboard Community of Practice, that information and the resources there are probably aimed more squarely at our integrity officers. And there's a range of resources there if you haven't had a look recently. There's past workshops such as the Turnitin's Generative AI Indicator, Writing Indicator workshop. There's information and workshop details about the authorship tool. And there's a reading list around academic integrity issues that you might like to access. And another resource that we've got there is was introduced last year, and this is particularly of interest, I think, to anybody who's new to the role of integrity officer. It's a Gen I misconduct guidance document for integrity officers. And the object behind developing that particular resource was to help integrity officers investigate and make a case of prosecuting instances of cheating using Gen AI. So if you want to pop in there and have a look at that, that could be very valuable to you. And those instances of cheating, I guess they're really focused at when courses have used either option 1 or option 3 of the 3 options that the university has asked us to abide by. If we can duck over to, yep, that's good. One of the resources I mentioned in the resources page on ELI are these academic integrity slides for class discussion. And these are designed to help you take an educative approach with students to make them aware of how they should act with integrity in all the work that they do. Part of the slide set is a link between academic integrity and professional integrity and with personal integrity. The slides that have been produced are accompanied by a set of discussion notes so that a course coordinator could just open the slides, open the discussion notes, and pick up and run with them pretty much straight away. And that will help to inform our students about academic integrity and the risks of not engaging in their work with integrity. So it's just been newly revised. I think it's just gone on the webpage today, hopefully. It's now got more information about contract cheating, file sharing, risks associated with using Gen I in their study, consequences of misconduct, and there's also a slide there that identifies a range of support, legitimate support, that course coordinators could recommend for their students as well. The resource is probably really good for use in the first few weeks of the semester when lecturers are describing their expectations for the course. It might be good for when they're introducing an assessment task in class, and it could be used at any other opportune time. It's adaptable, it's in a Word and PowerPoint, so you can pull it apart and use it how you wish. If we go to the next slide, please, Hong. Just want to run, many of you be familiar with the academic integrity modules by now. These were made mandatory in, well, we had a soft launch in 2021, and from 22, they've been mandatory and we've been making sure that students are completing them. So I guess you could say any student that started university or a new program since 2022 has completed the modules, which is really reassuring. And it's not something that we had prior to that, because there was no way of ensuring that all students completed the modules. These modules, since that time that they were launched, have continued to have some revisions made to the content to help address the new issues as they've emerged. So we've now got stuff on contract cheating, file sharing, and just a little bit on generative AI to meet the changing need. You can see the graph on the slide that I've got there. That just shows the numbers that we've had through the course. When I look in the course itself, it shows that we've had something like 135,000 people have enrolled. But that doesn't make sense to me. But those figures there are pretty accurate. I think we've got about 35,000 students who've completed it since 22. Now, to make it mandatory, there is the condition that if they don't get it done, there's Part A and Part B. Part A by census date, Part B by week 13 at the end of semester. Those who haven't completed the content in that time have their results withheld, and they're unable to enrol in the following semester until that work is done. So that seems to have worked. Most students get it done in time, but there's always the ones that lag behind. Each semester we've had an exit survey there for them for both parts A and B, and the students who do respond, and it's a pretty good response rate, they mostly do in a positive way and indicate that there's things they've learnt from using the content, or they've been able to understand more effectively. One of the things that stand out in the comments that I've looked at is a particular appreciation for some of the information and scenarios that they work on around group work. And it seems to come up quite a bit in the comments that they appreciate the guidance that's offered for them there. So while we're talking about integrity modules, there's an accompanying set of staff academic integrity modules that all staff, both academic and professional, are encouraged to do. This module's been designed and developed to help our staff to support and contribute to the academic integrity culture of UQ. They'll also give both our lecturers and our tutors a good understanding of the message that our students are learning through completing their own aim. And honestly, you can probably get the work finished in an hour. There are formative questions there that you can address if you wish. If you go through, you can get all the answers correct. Your name gets acknowledged in Workday, so that the training's been acknowledged, but otherwise you can just use it for your own benefit. And if you're not familiar with it, we've also got the RAIM, which is the Remedial Academic Integrity Modules. It's a duplicate of the AIM, but it can be used in instances where you think a reminder of academic integrity might be appropriate for students. So perhaps you've identified them as carrying out unintentional misconduct, or there's been a minor infraction against academic integrity, and you might ask them to complete the RAIM. We can capture the completions because it is assessed, and then you can be confident knowing that the student has actually completed that consequence if that's been set for them. I might just jump to the next slide, please, Hong. Now, just in the realm of other good things that it's worthwhile knowing, each semester Italy posts a teaching assessment update. It's in a link on the very front page, on the homepage of the Italy site, which brings together all the most important and latest information. So of particular interest to the community this semester are, you can see there's a whole range of things that are covered, but I just picked out three: preventing unauthorized academic file sharing. So doing the loading of files and documents, PowerPoint slides, assessment, tasks to file sharing such as Studoco, Chegg or Student VIP, etc. Students might do that for payment or credits towards being able to download content for themselves. Now, there's been some really important work done in this area, as Christine mentioned just before, and soon we'll have James that's going to report back to the whole group about the project that they've been engaged in with the library around file sharing sites. So I think you'll find if you go to that link in the Italy site, it'll give you all the information about it behind it. Another one I just wanted to bring to your attention was the generative AI in teaching and assessment, particularly if you're a new integrity officer and you're not as familiar as you'd like to be with UQ's approach to Gen AI. If you go to that site there, you'll find a whole range of information that can help you with teaching, learning and assessment and guiding your colleagues in that area as well for Gen AI. The other one was the online exam options. There's not a lot there, just a little bit of a summary on what you need to do, but there's some really good links reaching out from there. There's a digital exam guide and exam information sheets that might be worth while your time having a look at. It can, the guide can brief you and your colleagues on ensuring integrity, settings for online exams and security. And just by the by, I think e-learning also offers workshops there or private consultations to make sure everybody comes up to speed with that. If they need to learn about the settings that they should set on their exams. So I can see Holland nodding. So it is a offer that the e-learning community provides. Just to finish up, if we could go to the next slide, please, Hong. In the previous slide, I mentioned about the Italy pages to inform you and your colleagues about Gen AI and TLA. This is just a quick slide to show you what exactly is on that page, particularly on those pages, sorry. Of particular interest you might find are the resources and guide for students, which sends you off to the library's Gen AI tools for how to reference for those tools, and also a digital essentials module that they've developed on Gen AI. Look, I guess part of our message for today is we want your feedback as well. So if there's particular resources that you think you need that would help you in your role that we haven't addressed already, if there's a common problem and you think it's something that Italy might be able to help with by developing resources, please get in touch with us and let us know, and we'll see how we can help you as well. That's just about it from me, but what I would like to do is introduce Ruth and Hong, who are going to share their knowledge about Turnitin's new similarity report. Thanks, everybody.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ruth. I'm one of the e-learning advisors here, and I'm just going to speak briefly about Turnitin's new similarity report. Now, don't be alarmed from the outset. At the end of my little part, Hong will go through the timeline of for the deployment and the communications. So just to remind you, UQ uses Turnitin as a web-based assessment, submission and feedback tool, and the text matching software, which generates the similarity report, is of course one of its key features. Thanks, Hong. So you might be familiar with this color coding, that when you are in the assignment inbox in your Turnitin area, and you've got all the student papers listed there, and you can see a color code under that similarity report column. That color coding will not change from the existing similarity report to the new one. So this is the same color coding that is automatically pulled into the grade center. So that color coding won't change. The same thing, if it's red, you want to be worried. Although the color itself doesn't indicate this plagiarism, you still have to do the investigating, of course. Let's go to the next slide. So let's get straight to what the new one looks like. In the background is what the old one looks like that you're all familiar with. In the foreground is a snip from the new one, and I'll show you a live demo in just 1 second. But the major difference is that there are new match groups or categories. So the matching that has been identified by the similarity report in Turnitin has automatically categorized them into these 4 groups. But really, it's only 2 groups. Is there a problem with the quotation and the punctuation around that? Or is there a problem with the citation, for example, missing a citation? And Turnitin claims that along with their in-app guidance, using these match groups or categories to guide you will make it much more intuitive and user-friendly as you investigate these possible instances of misconduct. I'll just show you the categories on the next slide before I show you the new demo. Oh, sorry, on the slide. Thanks, Hong. Just so you can see these icons really clearly. So you can see the first icon, you can click through, looks like a red document. And this, so where it's got 16, that means there's a problem with the citation and missing quotation marks. Whereas the orange speech marks, there's a problem with quotation. The yellow menu icon, it's possibly missing a citation. And of course, the green one, the green graduation cap, means that it has picked up an exact match, but it's acceptable, meaning it's quoted and cited accurately. On the right-hand side, you can click one more time, other sources. So these two tabs will be very clearly displayed on the right-hand panel. And now let's have a look at the live demo. Thanks, Hong. So this is live, and it's a link available for you to demo. You can see the two groups. Hong, could you just click backwards and forwards between those two tabs, match groups and sources? All right, and if Hong now clicks on a sample of text that's highlighted in the student text, you'll see that it will jump to that particular source on the right panel. Okay. Back in that match groups area of the panel, you can also collapse and expand the groups. So Hong's back there. Let's go to the yellow ones, Hong, just quickly. So click on the yellow, it'll jump down there, and then Hong is able to collapse that yellow group as well, depending on where she's investigating further. One more thing while I'm here, up the top in the right-hand panel is the filters area. Now, this was actually also in the existing Turnitin similarity report, but I think Turnitin is right. This is more intuitive to just have it there on that front layer. So you can turn off these, these areas to match, to make your life easier or to hone your investigation as you're marking. So I think that filters area is more obvious to you as you're marking. Thanks, Hong. So that's what the new similarity report looks like. Can I just remind you that match grouping is done by AI. So it does need that human eye over it. And back to the PowerPoint, thanks. In line with the release of this new similarity report, I'll just tell you where Turnitin is up to with regards to their database. So they've got 47 billion internet pages now. Just keep clicking. Nearly 2 billion student papers, a gazillion journal articles, and they've been really heavily promoting that there's a growing non-English language portion of their database, as well as now they've reached over 2 decades in their development of the index of student papers. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and Hong and I will do our best to find out from the vendor any other features and how it's going to work in the UQ environment. But I'll leave it over to Hong now to explain the timeline. You can skip that, Hong. Thanks. That's it.
Yeah, thank you, Ruth. I hope that you have just had a quick overview of the new similarity report. And from the vendors, we only know that the tool will be available sometime from now until March, but we do not have the date yet. And what we are going to do is that we will make it available in the training environment, and we still turn it off in the production side. So when you use Turnitin, it's still in the current form for the similarity report. And throughout the semester, we will provide training for ADA, academic integrity officers, learning designers, and academic staff. And in that process, we also get feedback from you so that we can feed that one back to the vendors with any features that we would like to enable or further develop. And during the semester break, we will turn the new similarity report in the production side or in the admin side where you have your officer Turnitin submissions in your Blackboard course. And we also still have the option to use the current version if you feel more comfortable with the current version. And I think that the current version will be available in another year before the vendor turn it off completely to switch to the new similarity report. And after that, we will do more communications and develop guides and continue receive consultations from users to improve the training material and also send that feedback back to the vendor. So if you have any suggestion on the process of how to implement the new features in the similarity report, please connect to us and we will make sure to get your ideas and suggestions into the process. And now,
Hoang, Sharon's just asked in the chat, what about professional staff training? Is that included in your second step there?
yes, yeah, we will train for everyone. By staff here, we means everyone, all the staff, not just sorry if we do not make it clear enough, but yeah, it will be for everyone interested in knowing more about the new similarity report. Yeah. Yep. So I will come back to the questions about the Turnitin AI detection tool when I have more advice from the from Dom, our learning designer, and we'll get back to that question. Thank you, Victoria. And now I will introduce the next presenters today, James. The next presenter will be Rod.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rod Wybert, I'm the Manager of Student Complaints and Grievance Resolution in Academic Services Division. I just want to give you a brief summary of where we're at with like the administration and misconduct process and how it may impact you as integrity officers, both new and ongoing, and just what some of the points of consideration going around at the moment you might need to be mindful of. So two of the major developments that have happened in this space in the last 2 years. 2 years ago, we introduced a new disciplinary framework, which was an overhaul of the misconduct policy, and it wasn't a major change to the mechanisms, but just brought up to date some of the principles around which it's based, and that flowed on to some procedural changes, emphasize certain principles of like fair practice and whatnot. So now that framework is 2 years underway, it's fairly well embedded, but as with any policy, there's always going to be changes that we need to be mindful of. It might be external pressures like feedback from the Ombudsman or from TEQSA. It might be changing priorities in terms of case type. So obviously in the last 12 months, there's been more of a focus on artificial intelligence and the impact that may have going forward on the types of misconduct and how we classify it. And also there's been a fairly major emphasis, as Christine said, on medical certificates, where we've seen some very significant cases and case numbers in that. And they're the sort of things where that affects our review of policy and procedure, because if we need to know, like, are our mechanisms for dealing with these misconduct types sufficient, or are there underlying factors causing these things that we need to address in a broader approach, like a preventative approach and things like that. So in terms of the policy framework, I think that anything that we would highlight for integrity officers and whatnot is that, especially at the school level and faculty level, where you're running misconduct committees and working through due process with the misconduct case, we really encourage you just to ask questions of the SCGR team if you're uncertain about things, or if you're have comment to make about trends or issues that you're seeing, because it's all part of the review of policy. Now, the other major development that has been more on a practical level, is the introduction of the new complaints management system, which came in April last year. So that's, you may know it as Advocate. So that's a university-wide complaints management system, which is designed to be the centre point for all grievances and misconduct processes for all landing units in the university. So that includes the integrity unit, student services, HR, research, and ASD in schools and faculties. So that is obviously the implementation and working through the tweaking the system and the processes around that system is an ongoing process. So far, we've been quite pleased with how it's been working, and all of that. You know, we've had some really good feedback from school administrations and integrity officers about what they like, what they don't like about current processes and templates, you know, the documents that we have lodged, stored in the system. So it's a system that allows for a degree of individuality for each landing unit, each school, to sort of shape their process, and the personnel that do that process is, you know, to suit the school's needs. So we encourage you to, as IOs and admin teams, to think through what works for you, and then talk to us about if there's anything that you can suggest to us, or just consult with us about how, you know, to make the process more efficient, or if there's any changes that you can see might be relevant. Advocate, the implementation of Advocate is an ongoing process. So now that we've got, you know, three-quarters of a year of data into the system, we're getting to the point where we're looking forward to a year of full data, bedding down processes and audits of cases, you know, so that we can provide better guidance to everyone about how a full process works and what we need to see in the system. The focus for us this year is to, both in terms of policy and in the Advocate system, is to consolidate a lot of the change that has happened into bedding down networks and good communication across the university. We prefer a collaborative approach on all these things. We want to build up our networks, our contacts, and encourage the sharing of information from us to landing units, but also between communities of practice and admin and IO teams within, say, similar discipline areas and faculty groupings, so that we're all up to date with what changes are happening, what are the considerations, and what are the things to be mindful of. So one of the ways that we're doing that is within Advocate. On the homepage, there's an announcements page. So we'll be utilising that a lot more this year to put up like hints and changes and just little notifications about what might be relevant to policy or procedure or system changes. As a team, we also encourage the sharing of like training materials, and encourage your feedback on what other training materials and information guides we can develop for you. We are also endeavouring to do a lot more visits and regular contacts with all school teams, you know, to try to see you on site, you know, several times during the year, so that we can just talk face to face through, you know, what you're experiencing, if you need advice, or if you've got feedback about what you're seeing and how you're experiencing the misconduct process. So we will have our team, especially the case coordinators, will be your primary point of contact, but we will we'll be endeavouring to do face-to-face visits a lot more this year. going forward, a couple of the things that will be important for this year, in addition to promoting communication and networking, is there's an emphasis on trying to ensure that we have consistency of decision making and outcomes right across the university. Now, the challenge here is that, like we said, each school has a different profile of how they do things, and also sometimes the type of misconduct that that might be more prevalent in their area. That might be related to assessment design. It might be related to the nature of the content of courses. So there's a degree of localization that needs to happen to effectively deal with misconduct. But we're just encouraging communication and feedback, and just trying to promote sort of information and sharing that allows us all to follow the same principles in our decision making and the communications that we produce, the documents that we produce, so that in time we're developing really consistent and principled practices in how we approach misconduct. And that flows through effectively for our reporting to senior management, Senate, and also TEQSA and external bodies. Just one little thing that occurred to me before. Christine mentioned about med certificates. Thing that she said was really, really true, in that medical certificates are listed under both general misconduct and academic misconduct, or at least falsification of documents is. So if you're an IO and you're deciding on a misconduct, if it's something that relates to a course and course content, then usually it'll be an academic misconduct case. A general misconduct case for false med certs is probably related to a separate admin process, which is not related to a course. So they're just the little distinctions which are to be mindful of when you're categorising cases and allegations. We welcome your feedback at any time. Just drop us an email or call us, and we're happy to talk through any concerns that you have. I'll hand over to James.
Thank you, Rod. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. For those of you who don't know me, my name is James Lewandowski-Cox, and I am the university's copyright officer. Firstly, I'm going to talk to you about Gen AI and copyright, and then I'll talk about the much hyped in this session academic file sharing project. So there's 3 talking points I'd like to cover today in terms of Gen AI and copyright. So if we can just jump to the next slide. Firstly, outputs from generative AI cannot be copyrighted. Now, we have the monkey on the right here to thank for this. This is Naruto. Naruto took this photo. This is a monkey selfie. Now, many court decisions have found that Naruto as a non-human person cannot own copyright. And that's basically where we're at with Gen AI outputs. If we can go to the next slide, please. And a more recent example of that, and one specifically about Gen AI, was from March last year. Now, the US Copyright Office, we don't have an equivalent in Australia, just want to flag this. Recently, well, I say recently, March last year, as I said, clarified some decisions that they made about this particular graphic novel. Now, the author wrote the story and used the AI tool Midjourney to create all of the images for the graphic novel. Copyright was initially granted to the work as a whole, but the US Copyright Office subsequently revised its decision to only copyright the human-generated story and not the AI-generated images. This was despite the author saying that they did extensive alteration of the images after the AI did the generation. So basically, we're still in this position, thanks to Naruto, that non-human authors do not receive copyright protection for their creations. Not so much a big deal for students and academic integrity, but it's worth noting that you know, the use of other Gen AI outputs is not protected by copyright. The second talking point to do with Gen AI and copyright is that outputs from Gen AI might infringe copyright. This is probably a bit more of an important one for this group. If we can go to the next slide, please. So what we have seen is that outputs from generative AI have frequently infringed copyright. We've seen this with the text-based ones, so the ChatGPTs of this world. On the screen here are two examples that are currently being litigated. So what we see here is Stable Diffusion trained their image generator on Getty image libraries, and it learnt that a press photo has the Getty Images watermark on it. So someone has typed in that they wanted a photo to look like it's a press photo. It now outputs with this mangled Getty Images watermark. Currently, Getty Images is suing Stable Diffusion for unauthorized copying of their image library in the training of the Gen AI, and also copyright infringement for the unauthorized reproduction of their watermark in such outputs as these two. Now, should Getty Images win this case, it will be a massive shakeup for the industry because it would essentially mean that it would shut down that particular AI tool, because you cannot remove the corpus once it's been used to train the AI. So you can't walk it back. And so this could have a big impact on the AI industry, depending on how we go with this court case. In terms of this, though, and a bit more of a kind of teaching and research focus, UNESCO recently issued some kind of guides about the use of AI in teaching and learning. And if we can just jump to the next slide, I've pulled a thank you. I pulled this flowchart from that particular report. And you can see here, there's the two kind of central diamonds. Does it matter if the output is true? Love that question for a Gen AI output. But also the second middle one there. Are you able and willing to take full responsibility, legal, moral, etc., for any missed inaccuracies? Now, this is a big one when thinking about using Gen AI. And it says ChatGPT here, but we also need to think about image-based ones as well, which can infringe copyright, as we've seen. We know that there can be these reuses of work. We know that it can infringe. And so there is the possibility that a student, if they are using ChatGPT to write an essay for them, will actually infringe copyright, as well as ChatGPT potentially making things up. There is the possibility for copyright and plagiarism in that. And the final talking point is a bit of a big one as well. Be careful where UQ library resources and any data are uploaded in terms of Gen AI. Start with the library resources. So things like journal articles and book chapters. We've already heard people are uploading these to sites like ChatGPT for analysis, for translation into other languages, for summaries. Really encouraging people not to do that. And the reason for this is uploading those resources to, say, ChatGPT infringes on the agreements that we have with the publishers. And as we've seen, if the output infringes that copyright, then there's a bit of an issue there. And we know that all of the major Gen AI tools have only been trained on things that are publicly available. So they haven't been trained on anything that's been behind a paywall. And that would be academic journal articles. If we can skip forward a couple slides, thank you. At this point, if we are wanting people to do that, we are recommending that people use Copilot, formerly known as Bing Chat. We have an enterprise agreement with Copilot, as Glenys will talk about in a moment. But what this means is that anything that we upload for analysis to Copilot is not saved and not used to train the corpus. So therefore, it's not infringing those agreements we have with the publishers and things like that. And as we've also seen, we are obviously encouraging people not to upload any research data, particularly if it's of a sensitive nature, to any kind of AI tool, because again, that can be used in another output without your knowledge and potentially infringingly, and potentially in a way that compromises the integrity of your data. So that's my 3 copyright and Gen AI talking points. We've got time for questions at the end, so I will skip on to the much hyped file sharing project and give you a little bit of an overview of what this was about. You might have seen an email from the DVCA earlier today, which talked a little bit about this project and provided some resources. I'll be referring to that again as well. So last year, we were asked to run a pilot that looked at using copyright as a mechanism to remove UQ teaching materials from these academic file sharing sites like Chegg, Course Hero, and Stu.q. The pilot had 2 aims. The first was to test this effectiveness of using copyright to issue takedown notices to remove the UQ content from these sites. And the second part of the project also looked at testing the so-called copyright filters that the sites claim to have. If we can jump on to the next slide, please. So we started out looking at the takedowns, and our goal was to remove 5% of UQ files from Course Hero and Stu.q. The pilot project did not look at removing files from Chegg, as file discovery on this site is not as transparent as the other 2. We also have apparently 65,000 files, UQ files on Course Hero. It's not UQ, but it's a large number of files. So even though the 5% total may seem a little small, you know, for removing 5% from Course Hero, that equated to removing 3,277 files. So it was quite an effort there. As you can see, we actually achieved our targets of 5%. We took down 7% of files from Stu.q and just over 5% of files from Course Hero. So we had a few learnings from those takedowns. If we can jump to the next slide, please. What we found is that there's really 3 categories of content that went up on the sites. There's clearly branded UQ materials, those that have the logo or other distinguishing UQ brand features. And when we issued takedown notices for that first category of materials, the works were removed immediately. The second category we came across are non-branded UQ teaching materials. So a lot of lecture and tutorial slides, notes, previous exams and tests, things like that, that are on no kind of UQ brand template or anything. There's sometimes maybe a course code, maybe a lecturer's name, maybe a lecturer's email address, but otherwise there's nothing to really associate it with being from UQ. We did issue takedown notices for these materials, but what we found is that it can often take up to a week to get these removed, as the companies write back to you to ask for more information to kind of prove that you are the owner of this material. The final category of works that we found were a lot of things that were categorized as being part of UQ, but were not actually created by any UQ staff. So things like student works. We even found works from other universities or organizations. We found government reports that had been uploaded and tagged to certain courses. There's nothing we can really do about that category of works, as we aren't the copyright owner. So we can only issue the takedown notice for works where we are the copyright holder. Okay, next slide, please. So we also, as I said, set out to test the upload processes of these websites. The main thing we wanted to test is if a prominent copyright notice, so copyright the University of Queensland, would prevent uploads. It doesn't. These sites don't particularly care about a copyright notice. Course Hero have provided advice previously that the inclusion of a phrase, "This content is protected and may not be shared, uploaded, or distributed," on works does prevent upload to their site. We tested this and it does work. We also tested it with white text on a white background, purple text on a purple background, and it does work. Especially when when PowerPoints are turned into PDF, They go through a kind of character recognition thing, so you can search for words within it. Then the phrase is then picked up, and that content is not uploaded to Course Hero. We also found that there's various incentives that these sites offer students when they're doing these uploads. So that often looked most like premium access. So for example, Course Hero, you have to upload 10 files to C5. So the more you upload, the more you get to see. But it actually often also included money. The team was offered between $2 and $9 per file that we uploaded to Stu.U. We didn't take the money. Legal told us not to. But we could not complete the upload process without accepting the cash offer. And indeed, Stu.U, in their terms of use, say that if you would like a file removed, you have to return the money to them. So it kind of says that you cannot upload anything to Stu.U without accepting that cash offer. So we came up with 5 recommendations from the project. Here they are in front of you. The email that went out from the DVCA today addresses these 5 recommendations. So I will jump to the rollout slide, which is next, and I can talk through that. So the DVCA email went out, as I said, today. In that, there is a link to the website that you see on the right-hand side of this slide. So this website gives you further information about the project. It includes a link there to the final report. So if you're super keen, then please feel free to read the report. You can also see there on the right that it has links to the 3 new teaching templates. So there's 2 Word document templates and a PowerPoint template. At a minimum, we're asking that staff please include the first and last slide from that new PowerPoint template in their teaching slides for this first semester. We understand that it's going to be a big task and a big ask to move everyone's teaching PowerPoints over to this new template, especially this close to the start of the semester. But if we can get use of that first and last slide, that's where we've got the Course Hero notice, the Course Hero phrase, and we also have branding. So it will prevent things going up on Course Hero, and it will also make things easier to take down on other sites should that get up. Also, my colleagues in the library's tech training team have developed a video, which is also linked on this site, that talks people through how to merge their existing PowerPoint slide decks onto the new template. So that's all on this website. The link is in the chat. The email came out from the DVCA earlier today. So I think I will leave it there, and then we can wait for questions at the end. Now, who am I? I am introducing Glynis to take over. So thank you all.
Great, thank you, James. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for allowing me to speak for a few minutes. I'll just cover what's happening with Copilot at UQ. It was previously known as Bing Chat Enterprise, for those of you who started using it earlier. So if you could move to the next slide, please, Huang. Briefly about Copilot, it is UQ's preferred AI tool to use. And as James reiterated before, the reason for that is because there are certain protections that using Copilot with our work credentials, logging in with our work credentials, gives us. Now, firstly, with regards to Copilot, it means that our business data is protected. So whatever we insert in Copilot in terms of prompts, in terms of answers that are received, will not be saved by Copilot. That also means that we can't run reports on what has been inserted in Copilot, so we don't have access to it, nor does Microsoft monitor it. The other important factor here is that whatever data is used will not be used to train the large language models, which is what the free versions of the AI tools are used pretty much doing all the time. So I think for those reasons, UQ is recommending that you would use Copilot, which has the commercial data protection. So if you haven't used it before, you would log in to Copilot with your UQ credentials, and then you will see the protected sign in the top right of Copilot. I have inserted a link there so that you can see it when you get the slides next time. The other thing to note is up until now, it has only been available to our staff at UQ, but Microsoft recently made an announcement that soon students will also have access to the commercial data protection if they log in using their UQ credentials. I'm still awaiting advice from our technology team who looks after Microsoft to see when it will become available within our environment. So I think this is a useful tool, but I'd like to go to the next slide and really talk about how could we use Copilot safely and effectively. I think one of the key things that we have to remember when it comes to AI tools is that it does not absolve us of our responsibility within our roles. And therefore, I would recommend that we need to remember that we are the human in the loop, which means that regardless of what the AI produces, we need to validate the accuracy of the output. And it is no different to academic journals that we read. We often go to the primary sources, we have a look and validate the information and check its accuracy. So we retain that kind of responsibility when it comes to AI. The other factor that's also important here is that we do check the terms of service so that you are aware of how your data is protected. But even so, we certainly recommend that you do not enter any sensitive information or protected information into AI, definitely not with the authorization of the person whom that data belongs to. So we need to ensure that we have the rights to use the data before entering it into Copilot. And more recently, at the beginning of December, Copilot became generally available. So it's no longer a product in review or in preview. But even so, I would recommend that as we use it, it's going to grow, it's going to develop so that we try and at least keep up to date with what it is doing as you are using it. Moving on to the next tool, here's just a brief outline that I'd like to explain really the approach that we could be taking when thinking about using AI. If we look at the first column, we can see that upside down triangle. And if you're like me, really, we always end up with a blank piece of paper trying to figure out, well, we need to create some new documents. And starting from a blank piece of paper is pretty hard. But in terms of what we can produce with AI, we could start with a starting point of reasonably good quality information, where we can then start at a much higher level when it comes to the product that we can review, that we can edit and try and improve upon. Because most of us don't get the chance to spend a lot of time to try and improve, but AI gives us that opportunity to start at a high level so that we have more time to improve the quality of our output. And that is what using the AI gives us. So moving on to the next slide, keeping that in mind, really the advice that we would be giving in terms of how to use generative AI responsibly and safely is we can encourage our students to use those kinds of tools as aids rather than replacements for their own work, and making that clear, providing guidelines on how these generative AI tools can be used within their assignments. So I believe that we have written that document as previously mentioned by Peter. In terms of assessments, certainly one of the points that they've mentioned is that we could encourage our students to reflect on the use of the generative AI tools and how it relates to that academic integrity, how it relates to the work that was produced. Ooh, and then also, it's about appropriately citing and referencing. So as James said, yes, we cannot have copyright attributed to information generated by AI, but we can cite and say where AI has been used in terms of the work. And so therefore also asking students to clearly indicate which part of their task or that assessment was used and generated by AI. And that's sort of some of the guardrails that we can provide our students to ensure that they can more effectively use it. Now, in the following slides, I've got some examples and looking at uses of how it could be used. So, well, if you don't mind just playing that video, this is a brief example of in academia how you could potentially use it. So here I asked it to generate a 10-minute presentation looking at an outline about maintaining academic integrity in the context of AI. And so rather than me starting off the blank piece of paper trying to think about, oh, what am I going to put in this presentation, I could just ask for some ideas, and here's a draft outline of topics that I could put in my presentation. But aside from just that particular output, I could then also go ahead and say, have an iterative process. So I could have a look at it and go, well, actually, add to it and then say, rewrite this outline in the context of the medical field and see how does the AI then change the topics in terms of what it suggests as its outline. So yeah, I'm adding that to that text. And we would then enter it and off we go again. Now, something I didn't mention at the start, but with AI, you have conversation styles essentially for getting it to generate. You can have something which is very creative. You can have something which is balanced, or you could have something that is pretty precise and accurate. So I would think that in terms of a teaching and learning context, we might want to go with something which is more precise and accurate in terms of the types of output. We don't want them to have too much creative freedom in terms of generating content for teaching and learning. So that was just one example of how you could use it to not start from a blank piece of paper. The next example that I have is with regard to creating images. So not sure if you have a similar situation, but sometimes I have this idea, oh, you can move on, sorry, Hong, to the next one, where ultimately I'm looking for an image because I want to describe chaos and describe what it is like to have empathy. And here, if you could play that example, what I did was I pasted some content. I chose the creative style. I asked the AI to create an image for me that showed a contrast between a chaotic office environment and a calm environment. I asked it to described what the left-hand side would look like in terms of the chaos. I described the right-hand side. I described the people in the image. I described what they were doing. And then I let the AI go for it to see what it produced. So this is all real time in terms of recorded the amount of time it took for the AI to generate it. With regards to any image that you create, you certainly also have the opportunity to change the way that you are doing it. So here we go. So it's produced 4 different images for me. And I could go ahead and have a look at those images and then decide, well, does this match what idea I may have had about the type of image I wanted to create? And as I go through what the AI has generated, I might go, well, no, it hasn't quite captured what I wanted. And you can then iteratively go in there again. Now, I had asked it to give me an image of a female on the right-hand side. So I can go in there again and update it and say, could you change that? And by doing that, it will then go back and review, because it remembers the conversation. So it remembers the context of what I'd asked for before. And now it is taking on the adjustment that I've asked for, and it will then go ahead and generate a new image. So in a couple of seconds, we will have a new image, and you will see that that's what's produced. Wong, should I leave that question until the end of the session? There's just a question in chat.
Yes, we are copy the question onto the
Lovely.
Padlet and we have the Q&A.
Thank you. So there we go. So now I've got a new image and I'm thinking, okay, this is a little bit more of what I wanted and I might be happy with it. But this is an iterative process and it can take a while to do. The last example that I wanted to show, just in terms of the last slide, this is now I think James mentioned the UNESCO document that he got that diagram from, whether, you know, is it important that the truth is there? Now, this is a fabulous feature, and this could be helpful in terms of if you need the time, if you don't have a lot of time. Yeah, I've opened this UNESCO document in the web browser. And because I've opened it in the web browser, it gives me the button that says Ask Bing AI. And rather than just summarizing the document, I've asked Bing AI to please summarize this document, but from a change manager. So really that's looking at not just any summary, but taking the persona of a change manager. What did a change manager need to know from this document? And that's the context with which it has produced the summary. Obviously, you can have a great variety of criteria that you might want to put in place before you summarize a PDF. But those are just some brief examples as to how this could be used to add value, not replace studying, because you still have to study and you still have to critique. There is still an academic responsibility there. That doesn't remove it from being able to use these AI tools. So thank you very much for your time. And I'll hand over to Wong.
Thank you. And now we will get to the questions, the Q&A session. So if you have any questions, it's now the time to ask. But also we have been collected all the questions that have been asked during the presentation, and let me share the questions here. And so I will start off with some questions in the similarity report. The training dates, when will they be offered for professional staff? So yeah, Ruth have briefly answered it here. It will be offered to everyone throughout semester 1. And yeah, because we do not have the exact date from the vendor yet, so we are waiting for the date. And after that, we will plan for the rollout and communicate that to everyone. And we have some question in for you, Glynis. If the students start from that process, creating a 10-minute presentation, aren't they missing out on the thinking process? And also, isn't reviewing a different type of exercise?
Absolutely. Thanks for that question. I think that that is a valid point in terms of if that's the only place that you're starting. And so that might be very much a baseline kind of answer if they produce that. I think the useful thing is about the analytical thinking that a student needs to apply to writing a question. And I think if the student takes the analytical approach in thinking about the concepts before phrasing a question, in terms of that would actually create a bit more value to the output. So I think that I know I attended a session when we looked at AI and how does it affect assessment. And I think that probably now we need to look at different ways of how we assess somebody's knowledge and expertise, given the fact that they may have access to AI. So I think that certainly the way we assess items, the way we ask our students to take their learning to the next level will be different to the way we did it in the past. But I don't dispute that just doing a basic thing like that would be very limiting indeed.
Thank you, Glynis. So another question for you, Glynis. If in the same week, every student asks for a plan for a particular presentation, is it likely the markers will be faced with similar outlines?
Okay, so with regards to AI, generative AI anyway, so generative AI is probably not the same as a copy paste in terms of answers. So because it's generative, it means if you ask a question now, you're going to get a different answer every time, essentially, or there might be variations to the answer. So ultimately, because it's been trained on a huge, massive, varying language models, it's pulling data from all sorts of sources. So I think you won't get exactly the same outline every time. But I think that's where I suppose that additional complexity would come in terms of greater depth of phrasing of questions in terms of asking for an outline would come in, because everybody who asks the first basic question are going to get a basic outline. But the more complexity you add to your prompt, the more detailed and probably the more varied your response will be.
Yes, yeah. So Jessica here has a point to add in. So a number of students use ChatGPT, then the outcome become very similar. So as you have just explained, if they use a generic prompt, then the outcome will be quite general and it might look quite similar across the student submissions.
Absolutely. And so I think that's where, and I think in terms of general assessment, if somebody, all they do is rewrite things and they don't add their complex thoughts or they don't add their consideration, their marks are going to be fairly poor compared to another student who takes it to the next level and adds more critical thinking to their prompts and therefore the final outcome. So all it does is probably reduce the potential quality of their work if all they do is take it from the first draft.
Yep. Thank you. So Elizabeth have a question. I wonder, do we UQ staff have access to Copilot for Microsoft 3 for Outlook?
Yes. So did you say from actually what?
Yeah, so the question is, I wonder, do we UQ staff have access to Copilot for Microsoft 3, for example, Outlook?
Outlook. Okay, so so there's two different, well, there's many different types of Copilot. So Copilot is essentially the support, the assistant to you who is considered to be the pilot. Essentially, you control where you're going, and then you have a Copilot that assists you in getting there. So the one that is available to us for UQ staff at the moment, if you log in with your credentials, is Microsoft Copilot, which is on the web, on Microsoft Edge and on Chrome. And that's the one that will give you commercial data protection. And it will get its information from the web as well as the large language models that it was used to be, or that it was trained on. The other Copilot that you might be referring to, I believe, is Copilot for Microsoft 365. And that is where you pay, it's about $30 per month per person for Copilot for Microsoft 365, where it's used within the apps, like within Outlook, within Word, within PowerPoint, and so forth. So at the moment, we don't have access to that. We are getting to the point of having a trial to see how it works, whether it's effective, whether it makes sense from a cost-benefit analysis. But I would just like to also reiterate that it is important to note that there are multiple artificial intelligence AI features currently within the Microsoft apps, even without Copilot, that we probably are not using to its fullest. So I think that there is some productivity gains that we could gain from just using what we've got at the moment more effectively.
Thank you, Glynis. Yeah, sorry, Microsoft 3, it was hidden on my screen, so it's Microsoft 365.
That's all right.
Yep. So we have a question here, I think originally from Victoria. Hi, I'm a new integrity officer. The examination officer assigned me some cases to review on Advocate. Rob, could you please go through the detailed procedure for integrity officers on the expectations from us and our responsibilities?
Yeah, certainly. For Elizabeth and for any new IOs, we can provide like orientation guidance, both about the advocate system, but also about the policy. And we provide ongoing support, at any time, like email or phone. So as I've said to Elizabeth, if you're just starting off in the role and you're wanting a bit of orientation, a bit of training, just email us at SCGR and we'll arrange a time to come out in the next week or so, or as soon as convenient, to do a session with you, or online if that's more convenient. That's something that we can definitely provide to anyone that requires it.
Rod, could you put that email address in the chat, please, for you and your unit?
Yeah.
There? Thanks.
And James, we have a question for you from Philip.
Yes, I'm just reading it.
Yeah.
Philip, yes. This is a real line ball one from the copyright perspective. So the question there is a UQ staff generated lab report template, including the questions, and then the student has gone in and answered those questions. So technically, from a legal perspective, it's a co-authored piece of work. And as one of the authors, UQ has the right to ask for it to be removed. So yes, we have had that successful. We also accidentally had some success in removing things that were removing student works that were up on with cover sheets that had UQ brand on them. We did a very fast sweep, and some of those were picked up and accidentally removed. But it does go to show that UQ branding really helps in getting things removed. And while I have everyone's attention still, I would like to add one of the things that we have in the guide we've developed for staff that allows them to search and issue takedown notices for documents they find on these sites is a note of caution about what to do if they come across identifying details for a student in that instance. So we worked with legal on some wording around that, and the advice is that if a staff member does come across some identifying information that would reliably lead us to a student who might have uploaded the material, they should collect evidence about that, so things like screenshots, and submit that to integrity officers who can then escalate as required depending on the severity of those kinds of things. It's not always easy to identify the student, however. Sites like Course Hero generate a random username, so the username is not the student's name, although sometimes a student will upload a document with their name and student number visible.
Thank you, James. Is there any other questions from the audience?
Can I just do a follow-up? Look, thanks. This session's been so valuable. Can I just go back to the question of where the Turnitin report, comes up with a percentage? like, as you say, it's Turnitin saying, oh, you have to use caution. So last semester, our advice generally was, look, we can't use this because of the false positives. And then, you know, we had some assignments where we'd say, you know, 30% of this assignment has used AI or whatever. So what I ended up doing is, you know, saying to the student, look, it's indicating that you have used AI for a third of it. I don't know whether that's the case or not, but I'm bringing it to your attention. But certainly that the school policy was that, you know, we can't use it. So I'm just wondering how that's going to work in a practical sense for this semester. I mean, you know, every time we get this sort of reading, do we check it with e-learning, or can we have some kind of like general, like has it become more accurate, that detection of AI tools?
I don't believe that we've actually had any information to say it's more accurate yet. Actually, I mean, I just haven't heard of any. I think we're still in the same sort of limbo with it. So some institutions actually got to remove it, which we didn't have that luxury at the time. So they aren't facing what we are. So I think the message still is it's educative. Now, in saying that, we had a guest speaker, I'm sorry, I've forgotten his name, a professor from economics last time in this session, who talked about how he'd used it for a few, and some went, and there was an extra thing that followed on that some of those had gone to misconduct. But really, I think you've got to weigh up your time, obviously, and your resource. And if it means talking to the student and saying, beware, you know, I don't think you can still use a percentage. Yes, thank you, KK Tang. So I think, you know, for your own like workload and stuff like that, just use it that way. I'm on the network for the sector, and they're still talking about percentages and what's going to be this and that. And we cannot use it. Well, Rod could speak to that, I guess, as a, you know, a definite, the students cheated. And if they have actually used it, I think still, correct me if I'm wrong, Rod, it's still educative. Have you had cases yet where that's become a big part of it?
I think you're correct. We recommend that you only use percentages as indicative, as a starting point for doing the more in-depth investigation, because that's where you're going to get the evidence bundle, which is going to be what will be really more convincing for a case if it goes to a formal process.
But if you're going to get a lot of cases, you know, I think it's you can't do everything, right, as the integrity officer. And if you get overloaded with trying to take on all of those, which happen to some people, it's unsustainable workload. And a principle of assessment at UQ is that it should be sustainable, as we know, as much as possible. But, you know, it's okay, I guess I'm saying. We don't like students cheating, but on the other hand, you probably don't have enough hours in a day if you've got a great influx of taking on every percentage. If you suddenly decided that was over 10%, or because that's kind of what people are guessing, aren't they? We haven't set a percentage.
So do you think, Christine, is it ethical for me to point out to the student that it has picked it up, but that we're not taking it any further? Is that okay from, like, or should we not comment at all on it? What's the
Well, we heard examples of practice last time where people were confronting it. So I mean, there's various ways you could do that, I guess. Generally, you could use that as a message to students. You know, these tools are developed. We know that people are using it. You know, it's picking it up. And people last year were talking to the student. They were bringing them in. I can't remember. I don't know how they picked which percentage that is. Perhaps 100. I don't know. You know. What would you advise, Roz? I would think it would be okay to talk to the student, as long as you're not accusing them of misconduct, you know, just to say, be careful. Legally, how do we go with that, Rod?
Yeah, I think it's like, it's the same thing. It's if you want to bring the student in to have a conversation about, okay, we've got this, which seems, you know, unusual. What can you explain about this? But yeah, it's not really the basis on which you can make an accusation. So it's just really just the starting point for that conversation.
Anani's got a hand up, but I know we're nearly out of time. Have you got a quick comment you would like to?
Yes, sorry, my I don't have a computer with a camera at the moment.
No
So
worries.
I'm just becoming a bit disillusioned with how difficult it is to try and prove that students are cheating. However, despite my efforts to bring back in-person assessment tasks, I'm asked to jump through hoops. And I just want to caution or say that this is causing me to stick with an online quiz that is open over several days that students can do in their own time at home, despite knowing there's integrity issues. But last semester, I spent probably 3 full days trying to figure out which students added questions to check, working through the different situations because it's randomized questions, etc. But yes, so just want to caution that is that from a lecturer's perspective, not an officer's perspective, a lecturer who is asked to write a report when I want to report a student, meaning I need to do the investigation, that I am giving up in some regards.
Fair comment.
So that's just a comment. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. All right. Well, I know there's some more chat rolling, but I think it's probably time. So we're actually a bit over. But I want to thank everybody. This has been great and we do want to hear, you know, about your practice and how we can help. But I've just found today very insightful about from the presenters and what they've told us. So thank you very much for coming. And if you want to keep talking with us, please do. We have a community of practice online. Peter looks after that and sends out messages to everyone. There's resources for new people there. Please send something in if there's a problem, or direct it to Rod's group, or if it's resourcing to where I am in Italy. But yes, negative, positive, whatever's happening, questions, we want to be able to support you in your works, and we appreciate you coming and attending. And looks like a little poll's popped up to end it. So thank you, everybody.
Yes, Namita, yeah. Yeah, the last year, a lot of references produced by generative AI was incorrect. I don't know how far they have developed, but it's good to see that generative AI is still not being able to produce all the correct references. Otherwise, it would be very scary.
Well, thanks, James and Glenys, very much.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks
Bye-bye.
very much. Bye-bye.
Deal. I'll just pause the recording.
Yeah.